Second, do-it-yourself pitfall is that you assume that your will covers all of your assets. And it comes to as a surprise to a lot of people that your will does not cover all your assets. Your will controls only those assets that pass under your will. So then that leads to the question, well, what doesn't pass under your will? And this is something that is not explained in online form. So I really want you to be aware of this. What doesn't go under your will? So think of your life insurance policy if you have it. It probably pays to whomever you want it to pay to. So you have what's called a beneficiary designation on your life insurance policy. How about your IRA, your IRA, your 401k? That is going to pay again to whomever you've designated on the beneficiary designation form. It doesn't go under your will because there's a separate direction attached to that asset that says where the asset goes. Your joint bank account. Let's say that you set up a joint bank account. Let's say you're mom and you put one of your two kids on your bank account just to make things easier, and you set it up as joint tenants with right of survivorship. So then does that bank account go under your will to your two kids like your will says? It does not. It goes to that joint owner. And what happens when the one child who's on the bank account then inherits that account because you passed away, now it's theirs? Are they going to share it with their sibling? Well, you hope so, maybe not. It really depends on a lot of situations. Maybe that kid that's the joint owner with you is going through a divorce or has a creditor situation. Maybe that money, through no intention of that joint owner, just doesn't go to both of your kids because of some threat to your child who is the joint owner of the account. So that's just an example of what you need to be aware of. So you need to be aware that your will does not cover all your assets, and it certainly doesn't cover some of people's biggest assets, which is their retirement accounts. So let's talk about, there's some details that I kind of wanted to get in. Let's say you do your will first, and then your will says, everything goes to my two kids. And then you do this later on, you do a joint bank account and you put your daughter on it. Again, that will is not going to work. It is not going to cover that joint bank account asset with your daughter. And then it's going to be uncertain whether your other child is going to inherit from you. I earlier had mentioned a transfer on death deed, and I wanted to kind of circle back to that. A transfer on death deed is a way to avoid probate on your death. If you want your real property to pass to someone, you do what's called a transfer on death deed. So let's say that you have a will and it says that your property goes to everything you have goes to your two kids. And then later you do a transfer on death deed to your daughter. Well, the daughter is going to get whatever you said, that whatever real property, it's going to go to her and not to your two kids. Let's say you do a later will, you have a transfer on death deed that goes to your daughter, and then you change your mind and you say, oh, I really want that property to go to my two kids. So if you do that, well, what's the outcome going to be? The will is later. Doesn't the will then take control of or supersede the transfer on death deed? No, it doesn't. So even though it was your intention and you did estate planning in online form later, after the transfer on death deed, that transfer on death deed is still going to control. So how are you supposed to know that? That's where it gets difficult. That's where an estate planning attorney is going to help you out because they'll help advise you on that. And I can tell you that if you just do your Google research and you research transfer on death deed, you will find a form that's a transfer on death deed form. So everything I'm talking about with a will or a transfer on death deed, people can do on their own. But it's, what is not available online is the understanding of the interplay between these estate planning documents. The takeaway from this is don't assume that your will controls everything, because it does not.